This special meeting of the Ocean Township Shade Tree Commission has been noticed and is being recorded live streamed on the Ocean Township channel and YouTube.
Thanks, Norm, and that was Norm, our Shade Tree
Okay.
Chair, Commission Chair. And my name's Patty Cronin, we're the Shade Tree Commission. We have Shade Tree Commission members here, and we have people here from all around different roles in the community. We have want to acknowledge the council, Dave Fisher and Jeffrey Weinstein, who are here representing the council. We have Environmental Commission, we have Planning Board, we have members of the public, Gardening Club, and interested citizens. We have, I believe, Deal Lake Alliance and hopefully Deal Lake Watershed Commission will also be coming. The point of this meeting is to begin a conversation about and get public input about the comprehensive forestry management plan. And I'm going to turn this over to our consultants. The township was fortunate to get a grant from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection that we could hire consultants to help us formulate this plan. And they're here with us tonight from Sterling Consultants, and I'm going to turn it over to Ted Sawinski at Sterling Consultants.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending. I'm going to start off by just saying, first off, this is probably one of the most well-attended meetings. So it's a good thing. So if you're looking around and you're saying, that seems odd, but when it comes to being involved in your community, it takes a lot of effort to really come out and make your voice heard. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to start our stakeholder meeting. This is our community forestry stakeholder meeting, which allows us to give input and put priorities around what we do in community forestry. So as this goes into the process, we're going to just give you a little overview of what community forestry management is. We're going to give you a little bit of an understanding about what was already done by the community, which is a partial tree inventory, which took into consideration information about the trees in the community. That is the basis for where we start doing some of our work, but we still continue to bring that out further and further. As Patty had mentioned, there are grants that are available, and the community was great in achieving a grant to basically pay the fees for the community forestry management plan and for our work as consultants. So this is no taxpayer funded. There's no cost to the taxpayer. It's funded directly by the state. The goal is after this is done and the community forestry management plan is put in place, you would be eligible for additional grants, and hopefully that'll continue to work to benefit the community without having taxpayer dollars involved.
I could just add, this is going to be our 5th community forestry management plan.
Right.
And it's usually done every 5 years, but COVID interrupted that schedule, and it's due by the end of the year. And Ted is the lead on producing that plan.
Yeah, as Norm mentioned, so every 5 years, the community forestry management plan is closed out and then reviewed and then proposed for another 5-year term or period. And the idea is that we take information. So in 5 years, the community may change quite a bit. We've seen this in many towns where sometimes it can be development, sometimes it can be reforestation programs, sometimes it can be park space, green space that gets expanded. So there are a multitude of different ways in which the community evolves over a 5-year period. And that's why every 5 years this is put out there to be actually reframed, gotten from stakeholder feedback to move it forward in a direction that meets the community needs at that time. Okay. So I thank you all for coming, and I applaud your involvement. I'll start off by just starting with the guidelines for a CFMP update. And the guidelines pretty much, and you can follow the screen if you'd like on your left, we're going to cover a background of the CFMP. We'll walk you through the plan sections and understand where your input is valued. We'll discuss the priorities of the stakeholders. We'll have a conversation, and we'll give you the opportunity to rank your priorities. And those priorities will come back to us in terms of how we propose the first draft of the plan. The priorities will give us the opportunity to see the elements and goals of what the community is looking for. It'll guide us in that development. We'll put those goals together. Those goals will then be provided to you in writing, so you'll be able to see those on the township's website. You can then have feedback, so there'll be a session where we're going to allow you to give us any input you'd like to after you've read the goals and you've seen those goals are from what you've already stated as your priorities. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, great. So why are we doing this? And this is important. So data-driven management is what we do in forestry. And a lot of times when you think about community forestry, you might drive down the street and see a tree. And you think, okay, well, what does that mean in the overall sense of the community? Well, the community is based on the fact that there are trees without or throughout the community, and some of them are without maintenance over periods of time. Some of them are maintained at a little bit higher rate. the goal is they contribute to the urban forest. When we look at their benefit to the community, the idea is the data that we take from them allows us to make decisions. Those decisions drive where we go with financing, work that needs to be done, prioritizing management of those trees, looking for areas that might need transplanting, replanting, maintenance and pruning, maintenance and removal, or other things like education. So in other words, some of it might be community involvement, Arbor Day programming where you might involve the youth of the community to get them to understand the value of trees. So that's kind of how we look at this. And data is driven, or data drives this discussion. And so the major changes that came out of forestry planning, community forestry management planning in the last 5 years is the idea that we take an inventory. Inventory is gathering the data. So we walk around the community, we look at each tree, we give it a rating of its condition, we give its genus, its species, we identify what that tree's purpose is, if it's well suited for the location, its growth form and habits, the characteristics it's manifesting through its environment. We put that into data. That data then is extracted into different areas. It tells us what trees are growing well. What is the average size of a tree in your community? How long have trees survived in your community? Are they dying at a faster rate? Are they living longer? What trees are more susceptible to pests or diseases? So all that information comes from the data. And then the mapping of this really kind of almost in a sense allows us to go further with saying, okay, these are community-based areas that we think need more involvement in terms of planting or maintenance. So we can literally shift resources within that community as the goal. So those goals and objectives that we decide are important to you tonight, that is the next component to it. We've already done inventory, we've already gathered data, we already have a map. And again, it's a substantial portion of the community, but not the entire community. The goal is to continue to map the entire community until it's complete. Goals and objectives then are derived from your input. So the stakeholder feedback that we get tonight by you prioritizing what's important to you is what will give us those goals and objectives. They'll be formed, provided back to you in terms of your being able to review, read, and make comment. Does that make sense to everybody? Good.
And a big part of this process.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Ray Slayman. I work with Stone Consultants, and Ted and I have been doing a lot of tree work over the last number of years, and I bring a certain perspective into the process. I was shade tree manager for a number of years and so on, so I have some pretty good background in the community organizations. A big part of data-driven activity, data-driven intelligence means that the community wants to look a certain way. They want it to have a certain vibe. They want it to have trees. They want it to have a shade. They want it to be issues with flooding and so on. All those things are what the community wants. Where the data comes in, it says, okay, let's put resources in a way that can be most effective. So without knowing the way the community looks, without knowing the makeup of the forest as it exists today, then you'll be spending money in a haphazard fashion. So this really gives the community and answers to folks that manage budgets and manage resources. This data gives you tangible information that says we're going to drive activities and we're going to be cost effective, and it's going to make the community better in ways that can be tangible through things that we can do with the trees. They can't do everything, but if they can do them efficiently, then that's the goal for tonight and for the plan.
Yeah, so as you look at this, and Ray brought up a good point, he brought up about flooding. So you'll see issues like flooding, heat islands, areas of the community that may not see the benefits from trees as much, or have had trees in the past but have had them decline from neglect. So we look at every area of the aspects of the community as a overall forest, and then the sections within that township. Many townships are divided just by their own right of major roadways, or areas around certain portions of a community. I know we've talked about Deal Lake, and we said that there's an area around Deal Lake. There's an area that's broken by 35. There's an area that is kind of almost in a sense disjointed in some senses from the community, but it isn't, because what it is it's all considered part of that. It's all part of the urban forest. And so when we look at this, we may see an area where there might be more wooded areas or open space, and we might see areas where it's more developed. And so just keep that in mind as we go. And sometimes it's our own neighborhoods, and we don't know what the other neighborhoods look like as much because we don't interact with them. So it's kind of good to hear feedback from everybody in the room. Okay, so initially there's an introduction and background, which is basic history of the community, and that's provided in the management plan. What it does is it takes into consideration the current township council. So I'd like to thank the councilmen, both councilmen for coming tonight, and our deputy mayor for being here to kind of assist in this process. But it gives the understanding of their priorities. And so this is important to the community, it's important to them. They're here to support this, and I think that's great. As we look at the introduction and background, we look at the history of Ocean Township, we look at where it's come from, what it's been doing, how it's been managing its forest over years. We look at the program's capacity, what has happened in the past, and Norm brought this up, and I think this is great. The community has a history of doing community forestry management planning. That is an incredible opportunity to continue to drive the discussion to move things forward. With programs, we understand that not every goal can be met in a program. So when we come up with a goal, we think, okay, that's something we strive for. If it isn't met, the state asks us to always tell us why the hurdle was there or what might have given us the reason to not achieve that. It also gives us the opportunity to look at that in the next 5-year plan and say, is that a priority still as we look at it? Because sometimes priorities do change, even within a time frame of a year or 2 or 3. Okay? So just be aware of that. So program capacity is what will we be able to do with this information? How will it improve or make the community better? The community engagement and well-being portion is really looking at this from the sense of how does the community benefit from trees? How does it benefit from Arbor Day celebrations? How does it benefit from the youth engaging in understanding the benefits of trees long-term? How does it help in stopping heat islands from being focused in one area of the community? Or even, for instance, something like erosion that might occur from excessive rainfall. So these are all parts of how the community can get involved in making decisions, and that's where you are tonight. You're here to listen and kind of give us a sense of what is the most important aspect to you. And then the plan's implementation. Once the plan is drafted, it's completed, it has to go through an approval process. The plan is approved by our Shade Tree Commission in town. It then moves to the Township Council. Township Council, once approves it, goes to the state. The State Community Forestry Council has to approve the plan. If that is not done, then it comes back to us for another redraft. Okay? So we continue to do that process until it's complete for the fee that was involved. It doesn't cost you any more money, it just goes through a process. But the state always wants to give us their feedback also, and it's important that we listen to what they're looking for because, again, they are providing the funds.
And
Okay,
Ted,
so
if I
they have
just interject,
input.
you said to listen, and that's what tonight's meeting is about too, is for those of us on the Shade Tree Commission and the consultants and the council to listen to all of you.
Right.
That's why you were invited, that's why you're here, 'cause we wanna hear from you. So that's why you're all here.
Well, you're kind of in a sense listening now, but we're gonna listen to you when you start asking those questions. When we start asking you what the priorities are, that's the important part. So thank you, Patty. All right. So now we talked a little bit about the mapping piece, and so we do the extended boundaries of the community. We do a canopy cover. We do land use and land covers. We do overburdened and environmental justice communities within the county, municipality, so forth and so on, depending on if we're working with municipalities or counties. Other things that we consider are the tree inventory, heat island effects, impervious surfaces, and tree equity scoring. And these are aspects that only come from data. So when you think about this and you hear some of these terms and you're thinking trees, and it may not so much equate to that, the idea is that when we look at trees, we see as professionals the benefits that they provide the community. Not every community member can see that every time. Sometimes we hear people say, oh my God, I'm concerned with the cleanup, or I'm concerned with the maintenance, so forth and so on. And they're not seeing the value overall. And that kind of is where we step into the mix. We're trying to show you how valuable trees are in your community.
What is tree equity score?
So a tree equity score would basically look at the number of trees within your community versus a community that does not have that same amount of, so in other words, your community's size considering the amount of trees in it. So if you had an inventory where you said, okay, I'm looking at, say, 1,000 trees within 2 square miles. I'm looking at something along the lines of, 5 square mile town that might have 5,000 or 6,000 trees. So the importance of how the trees are in their condition. Okay, so on the CFMP section 1, which again CFMP stands for Community Forestry Management Plan, We do a mission statement, a liability statement, a community overview. We put in maps, we put in history, we put in accomplishments, and as Norm brought up before, those accomplishments are given priority here. We're going to look at everything that was done in the past of Arbor Days and plans for plantings and certain activities that were taken on by the Shade Tree Commission and the council's support. We also look at composition and trends in the urban forest, and that helps us understand simple things. What is the size of the trees? What kind of trees do you have? Many of you might think of identifying trees. We walk around the community and sometimes we hear what's called the word monoculture, which is a consistent repetition of trees over and over. So you might go into an area of your community and see one type of tree planted up and down a street. The idea is to move away from that. So we're looking for diversity to try to keep the urban forest from collapsing when there is a problem. So we'll use one simple example. How many of you have heard of what's called ash borer or emerald ash borer? Okay. So emerald ash borer took a huge toll on a number of communities in New Jersey because they had large percentages, and we talk large percentages could be anywhere between 12 and 24% of their community were ash trees. And when they weren't able to treat them because of the high cost of the treatments, what would happen then is then the community would basically say, you know, we're going to have to let it take its course. And in some cases, some trees did survive, but they lost large volumes of trees. With that being said, so you can lose a high percentage of your urban forest because you planted one type of tree over and over and over. So the idea is to get the diversity, okay? And that's really where we look through. The strength in the township is the diversity of its trees and its age. So you'll have trees that are from senescent age all the way down to newly planted, and we want a broad range of that.
And one of the things that the plan does, the inventory does, is it gives a snapshot in time, but it also then gives a basis for how the community has evolved over time. So it's wonderful that there's community forestry management plans to look back on that says, okay, what's happened since the inception of those? We can see that, and there's going to be more or less an archaeological record that says what's happened in Ocean over this period, and is it something that we're happy with as a community, or is it something that we'd rather make some changes? If the direction of the community is going in a certain way that says, and the information is right there in the CFMP or in the inventory, then we can say, community's moving in this direction. Is that what the community wants? And that's why you all are here, to say, we want the community to look a certain way, and we're gonna help move in that direction through this process.
So in inventory collection, and this is just to give you a little understanding, the inventory has been completed, a partial inventory, and that's what we're basing our information off of. That inventory describes the species, the diameter of breast height, that's what DBH stands for, it's the size of the tree. It does current potential height, categories, small, medium, and large. It does condition, good, fair, poor, and very poor or dead. And then its location, and then simple notes. Simple notes may be simple things about how the tree is surviving, a pest and disease that it may be under, or even something simple as a cultural practice like watering that may need to be done during periods of drought. Going into the section 2, we talk about community forestry program administration. We talk about the NGOs, which are notice of grant opportunities. We talk about nonprofits and interdepartmental supports. We go into training, budget, and equipment. So the idea is how does the town then do the work and carry out what the plan is? And so this administration piece is really like who's trained. And in this community, we have trained individuals who have taken what's called core training with the Community Forestry Department. They have also worked on developing budgets with the help of the council and the aid of the council to support it. And then they look at also the equipment that's necessary to manage it. And so that comes through Public Works, and some of the other resources that are there.
You might just point out, when you talk about community forestry, as far as this is concerned, it's really primarily things planted on community township property that's managed, you know, private homes and so on and so forth. Even though there's part of the community forest overall, it's really not a consideration right now.
Yeah, as Norm pointed out, most of the trees that are being reviewed and being inventoried are on public right-of-way. So they would be curb and sidewalk. They would be in parks. They would be in open space areas that are still held by the community or the township, as opposed to in private residence properties. There is also ordinances that are involving that, which is based on the removal of trees that was put through in what's called the MS4. MS4 is a New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection requirement for reducing runoff and flooding. So sometimes it gets confused with shade trees, but typically it is a permitting process in which, when you have private property, how trees are handled. Okay, so how do we engage the community? You're looking around and you're seeing how we engage the community. We invite you out. We ask you to come out to a meeting. We ask you to get involved. We ask you to provide feedback and hear a little bit about what the community does. So I'm going to just pause for a second and ask you, how many of you have now kind of thought a little bit differently about what community forestry was before you came? Did anybody see things a little bit differently from what we've been talking about? Okay, great. What's your name, by the way? Georgia. So Georgia, did it help you kind of understand a little bit about what the shade tree does in community forestry plan? Good. Great. Thank you. So at this point, we have the consulting forester, which is Ray and myself. We have the Shade Tree Commission members, and now we have the community members here. We also have the council. And this is where government works its best, because what's happening is we're asking for feedback. So now we're going to communicate with you and disseminate a little bit of these priorities that we think that you need to have kind of an idea of. We frame them in a certain way, and when you'll see them, you're going to understand that you're giving the priority number to it. You're just going to give it a number of 1 through 6 as to what you believe is the most important. We will then look at those and say, okay, so each group saw something differently, and we want to know why, and we can actually go further into that, but the goal is we really just want to see where the interests lie. And then the idea of explaining these, the benefits and understanding a little bit about what community forestry is, kind of helps us understand something. Even when we make decisions, we still deal with the challenges and barriers that are going to stop us from going forward. Some of that could be notice of grant opportunities or funding that are there. So again, that's where I said, well, sometimes we meet those challenges and those goals, and sometimes we retrend. We figure out where we are and where we need to go in the next 5-year period. And then section 4 is the plan implementation, and that's where the goals are developed, the elements that are part of this, and I'll explain that a little bit as we go into this discussion on priorities. The objectives of what we're doing, and then the action items. So the action items are really how the town manages this plan. And that's really what comes out of what your feedback is this evening. Okay. So I'm going to ask you just, if you can, to look over at the board. And the community stakeholder priorities that we typically list, and I'm going to break them down for you and kind of give you an understanding. There is a series of numbers, and I know as everybody looks over, they're going to look at priority ranking. The priority ranking is not the priority ranking that we've given anything. It's just the series to show you how the numbers are put in. Does that make sense, everybody? Mm-hmm. So if you see 1 through 6, it doesn't mean that 6 is the lowest priority, and it doesn't mean public safety is the number 1 priority, although I would agree it is. That just is the way we're showing you how the ranking is. So now you have to place your numbers 1 through 6 based on your interaction with the urban forest, and you're going to determine which ones are the most important to you. So public safety is basically maintenance and mitigation. When we say mitigation, it could be the removal of a dead tree. It could be sidewalk repairs that are requested. It could be pruning a tree. And so those are the pieces that are really public safety. It's keeping an eye on the urban forest and making sure that there's nothing that's going to be harmful to the residents as they interact with these trees in their locations. So think of a tripping hazard on a sidewalk. Think of something like, for instance, a dead tree where a branch might fall during a storm or wind. We want to make sure that we're protecting the public as much as possible. So you can see where that usually gets a 1. I have been in meetings where I can tell you that that does not get a 1. So not by most people on Shade Tree, and not by anyone on council, by the way, just so you know. But some people in their own communities don't view that as being the priority that they think it is as number 1. Community outreach. So this is the involvement in education. So as you're here sitting in the meeting, the idea is that we engage you into this process, and we educate you at the same time. Now, educational training is something that we offer, and the town has to continue to abide by. It's called continuing education units. And so CEUs, or continuing education units, are attained by members of the Shade Tree Commission, and they have to achieve a certain number a year. And those, if they're not achieved, they cannot apply for their annual accomplishment report, which then gives them the status of having a current active management plan.
Except that you can get credit for CEUs from anyone who's a resident of the township.
Correct.
They don't have to be involved with any of the commissions.
Correct.
There are things that we can put out, and there are, little seminars that are produced through the year from various people that are, they determine that these are worthy of having this continuing education.
Yeah, so we do a lot of outreach in that term of doing community involvement and education. And it can be simple things, as simple as identifying plants in the community, where we walk through a park and we help you identify some of the basics, just to give you better interaction. Tree preservation, construction and development is a common situation where tree preservation becomes a priority. This may be how planning board operates. This may be how developers get involved in looking at trees and their interest in preserving trees for the community as it's being planned and executed as a development. And the goal here is to see the community keep some of its older trees where possible, as long as they're structurally sound and viable and they can exist. And that's our key point there. Species diversification, this is tree selection and location. So this is where when we look at trees, we look to make sure that the tree is suited for the location. So an example of this would be planting a species that grows at a lower height underneath utilities so that there's no conflict and we don't have a tree that literally loses its form because as it grows up, it's being removed or pruned back by the utility. So that species diversification allows us to, again, not have a worry about something like emerald ash borer taking down 2 or 3 common species of ash trees in your community and causing them to be eradicated. So that's part of our process. So if that's important, we always put that in there as something that's it's more visionary. It's seeing that we're not just focusing in on Callery pear, red maple, pin oak, ash. These are very commonly used London plane in a lot of our communities without being diversified. And that happens to be a problem if it's all in one community also. And then we talk about plantings, and we talk about the installation of plants and reforestation within the community. And the goal is sometimes we're looking at installing, in other words, in a planting, so we want to say, okay, how many trees can we plant within a season? And we're not looking to put as many trees in that we just say, okay, we're getting out there and putting in droves of trees. The idea is that those trees are put in for sustainability. And the goal is they make the greatest impact in the community. And as we talked about before, where it said environmental justice and it said overburdened communities, this is where plantings make the most impact. So we want to look at that. And then reforestation can be in an area maybe where development has taken place and we're looking to seek to have trees put back into that location. And as Norm mentioned earlier also, because although the canopy in the community is the entire landscape of trees, the town really focuses more so on its right-of-ways. But everybody wants to preserve as much as you can in your community to make it the best and most comfortable area to live and raise your families in. And then we look at Arbor Day activities, which are programs and engagement. So these are ways in which we promote Arbor Day. We promote the planting of trees, the care of trees. We engage the youth to understand as they continue to mature within the community and they're becoming the next landowners, that they understand the value of these trees as they continue to live in our community and preserve it as we age. Okay, so now that you've seen the listing there and you have them in front of you, you have all 6 items. We'd like you to even just have a little bit of a conversation. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask. The goal is now to look at it, and if you're in a separate group, like if you're part of a community group or you are representing an organization, what we'll do is we're going to put your scores in, and that'll tell us where we want to see, or where you want to see the value of your feedback being put. Okay.
And I'd like to also offer anyone who's in the audience, I know a bunch of you, in those chairs,
Come on up.
please
Yeah.
come on up or or contribute. Please, your opinion is also highly valued. So we'd love to hear from everybody in the room.
Okay, is there any questions on those priorities? Go ahead.
I have one question. When you talk about safety, I know you're talking about hazardous trees and trees falling and so forth, but does it also include things like heat islands and flooding and other hazards
It
things?
can, yes. And so when we look at that, we look at, part of that being, when you see these topics, and you can kind of almost in a sense kind of realize, public safety is, flooding, it is erosion, it is a number of different aspects of where this falls into play. And public safety does take in a broader range. And we always look at it as part of this is where you hear the word mitigation. Mitigation is a word that we use because it fits everything without saying maintenance and removal or maintenance and hazard trees. Because we hear the word hazard trees, people get, oh my God, am I worried about the tree? And we see this many times after a storm hits. What's the first thing that individuals look to do?
Cut their own trees down.
Cut trees around their home down because they're afraid that they're going to cause some harm or damage, and typically that's done without any input from licensed professionals like myself or Ray, where we come out and we do consulting work. So it's always the best idea to get feedback to understand the health and safety of your trees before making those decisions. But mitigation can be something along the lines of looking at areas where flooding or heat islands are. Absolutely.
And even, I'll carry one further, Patty, that the idea about public safety includes the health, medical health too. You talk about heat islands, you talk about elevated heat areas, you talk about asthma, greater asthma effects and so on. So there are real physical, tangible benefits of a proper community forestry that involves community health. So children in an area, elderly people in an area, if you talk about an area that has a 10-degree hotter zone because of less shade, you talk about maybe standing water because of flooding, and you're talking about maybe mosquitoes or other insects and so on. So those are also elements of public health that trees play a role in.
Thank you, Ray, because follow-up was, that encompasses environmental justice.
Yeah,
So
yes.
safety includes environmental justice as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's a big point I know ocean's very important, that's very important.
Entrance to, yeah. Thank you.
Questions?
So
Don't be
would
shy.
this be pertaining to just public spaces and not privately owned?
So think of it this way: in terms of the town cannot require, and this is always an interesting piece. The town can, through ordinances, pass regulations to say something along the lines of, which is the DEP's regulation on, which is called MS4, stormwater management, saying that in order to prevent the erosion and flooding, they're requesting that residents now pay a fee to restore trees on their property. That is more so mandated by the state, not the council. So just as we look at that, but that's on private property, but it also is part of the community. So the DEP holds the township responsible as it holds the resident responsible.
But also,
But we do have regulations, the tree preservation ordinance, which is directed towards private property as to how many trees you can cut down, the permits that you require, all of that sort of stuff. There's all regulations for homeowners, okay? But the town, those regulations are then, that's more of a burden on the homeowners, okay? But the community forest, all the township owned properties where the township is going to take care of them, and then another, plant more, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so that's what I'm framing, answering, it's
Yeah.
more like.
So
Right,
more
right.
public space, more right away
But,
parks in those areas.
but
around
also in
schools.
other towns, sometimes towns do create public-private partnerships with, let's say, developers or apartment building owners, and they create these partnerships where, for instance, maybe the town will pay for the planting of the tree and the owner will do the maintenance so you can, I just invite people to think outside the box tonight.
Yeah, and that sort of thing exists already between, say, the township and, say, the Board of Education, say, other publicly or quasi-public properties that have trees or ability to have trees and so on. So there are areas that already exist in that fashion.
Right, when we had our survey, okay, I coordinated with the Board of Education, and the school properties were included in our survey.
Oh, good. Yeah, the more you can have a view into into all of the square footage, the better the better informed you're gonna be to make proper decisions. So that makes a lot of sense.
Is there any one of those priorities, and I'm guessing it may be diversification, but where the town will handle or deal with invasive species?
Yes, yeah, that's through diversity, yeah. Yeah, so we're looking for mostly natives. When we look to plant trees, we're looking for trees that exist within this climate zone, that won't be impacted by the climate per se and changes. So we'll use an example of Remember spotted lanternfly issues that have come out. Atlantis tree, which happens to be a native of Asia, is a tree that they are usually found on. However, other trees, like for instance Japanese snowbell and trees from the Asian continent, are also trees where you will find the spotted lanternfly on. We even saw emerald ash borer going to plants like Chinaanthus, which is fringe tree, which is a native also. There's a native fringe and a Chinese, or Chinese fringe as it's referred to, which is typically from the Asian continent. So we see some of these plants and we see some of the concerns that come up. And the goal is when we look at them, we look to see the natives that are the most resistant to those.
And just because, one last thing on that, so just because it's native trees doesn't necessarily mean that's what you want to plant, as Ted pointed out, with changing climate. You're looking at being forward-looking to say we're going to plant trees that may be more heat tolerant, more drought tolerant, and at the same time, ash trees are native trees. We're not planting ash trees, so that kind of thing. And the next on that Ted and I are seeing with beech trees, perhaps, is now we're not encouraging planting of beech trees because of beech leaf disease, which has been devastating the plant as well. So there's a balance on with diversification from native, yes, invasive species like tree of heaven, even Callery pears, those kinds of things you want to stay away from, but also not automatically assume that because it's native, it's going to be appropriate.
Even sugar maples are they're finding out that as it gets hotter and hotter, sugar maples are having more and more trouble surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah, this far south and in this location. So yeah. Go ahead and offer some feedback on that. That would be great.
No, I just had that question, and then my second question I had was around the township and Board of Education, like how they work together. I'll give you an example. At the high school, there's a massive tree of heaven that's spreading like crazy, and they throw out millions of seeds, so they'll just keep going. Just curious, who's really responsible for doing
So the
this?
Board of Education would do the maintenance of the trees on their property, but the communication could be from the shade tree writing a letter saying about the concern for invasive species like that. If that's not brought to their attention, they wouldn't know to take it down. And I always think of it this way, and as a former educator in terms of, I retired from public education, but still teaching, the understanding is you'll see they come to a table with a lot of different understanding and knowledge, but they may not have that knowledge that Norm might be able to share, Patty might be able to share with the invasive species like you just mentioned.
As far as budgeting for removal of something like that?
That would be required by the Board of Education, because it's on their property, yeah.
But then I'm glad you brought that up about budgeting and so on. So knowing the character of the arboretum forest, knowing the age, knowing their condition, means that you're going to have a general idea about what kind of expenses you're going to incur for management, maintenance, and removals. Without having that information, without having this form, without having the inventory and the CFMP, then you go into every year saying, I can spend $10,000 or I can spend $150,000, and you don't know. So this is the sort of thing that's going to help the borough understand where expenses may be, where liabilities might be through this process.
And then just one other item, I think this is something we can bring up later, but a lot of the trees in town have ivy, English ivy growing up them, poison ivy growing up them, and they're, leaning over the lake, and they've got all these, ivy, and is it the public, I don't know if that's public land or
We have to look at right-of-ways, you have to look at right-of-ways, and sometimes in the right-of-ways, they can be quite broad and encompassing, and other areas are very narrow. That usually is done with Public Works, kind of showing us the areas of where those are. And in the inventory, that would have not been probably accounted for unless it was in a public right-of-way, as Norm mentioned, where there were street trees. But I think part of what you just mentioned, I think, which is really essential, is it's about communication. It's about communicating to the Board of Education about the invasive species, and then allowing them to understand that, yes, they may need to budget for it. It may not be this year, but they can at least budget for maintenance or the removal of that tree in the coming year. But if they don't know it's there and it's a problem, the invasive species are going to continue to spread from it. So it's important to educate them and provide that communication. It's also important to let residents know about the concerns of vines taking over trees. So these are all essential pieces of communicating. There's no doubt about it.
So I guess this question should go to Norm then. Were the trees around
the township, main township properties like Town Hall, the library, Hillcrest Park, there's an effect in schools, all the parks and so on and so forth, and we started working on streets, radio streets, okay, but we didn't get as far as we thought we would, okay? So we still have a lot of trees that should be surveyed, you know?
Will this area be included?
Well,
Are
we
you
have to
done
see
with
what
the
we're
inventory?
doing, we have to look into all the things we have to do, you know, what we're gonna do for funding, whether, how funding can be generated and so on and so forth.
We hope to get grants to be able to do it all. It's just a matter of getting the grants to do it. It's expensive to do these surveys, so we gotta get state grants. But we are open up, as Ted said, we're gonna be open up. This is part of the process that opens us up to more grants.
But ideally, that's what we would do, okay? But just from people that are knowledgeable, like Ted, driving around, you know, the first thing is number one, is public safety, or there have been trees that weren't surveyed, but that are obviously dangerous trees, and that, you know, that becomes a priority. And depending on how much money I'm spending on that, that sort of changes what we do next and so on.
And you know, when you're looking at goals, I think part of this is we develop goals, and then those goals get put into the plan. Because you prioritize something over someone else doesn't mean that that's always gonna be the number one priority. It's getting the feedback and saying, okay, if 4 subgroups within the community said that, you know, species diversification was a number 1 priority goal, that would be something that obviously is going to take a serious impact on how we move forward with the plan. If someone were to say public safety, which again, I can't imagine anybody saying that that's not a priority, that would be a concern, to say again, how many of us have looked at that as being, you know, a high level, and then the contributing parties, when they come back to their feedback, says that that is an important aspect, you know, so you start looking at how we're addressing each one of those. Okay, and I'm gonna help the deputy mayor out. I know he has to leave at 7:45. Dave, thank you very much for coming. And I know he has some prior engagement, but I figured it'd be a good time to break. And our goal now is again, just to kind of have some dialogue, and I think what we're doing is great. It's just to ask questions, get some feedback and thoughts, but also at this point, we're gonna ask for, you know, another 5-10 minutes of conversation, but then start looking at these and giving us some feedback. And as Patty said, please come on up, ask some more questions, work in groups. If you represent an organization or you represent a subgroup within the community, you know, you could sit as the subgroup and just put your priorities together, and we can enter them in so that we at least have that feedback.
I just want to mention that we do have a map here with multiple layers that show flooding, sort of where the parks are, you know, where the heat islands and the lack of canopy are in the overburdened communities in town. And the overburdened communities basically are defined by the state of New Jersey. It's a term that means lower income, English as a second language, and identifying as people of color. So, and they tend to be in the least dense canopy area of the town. So you can come up and look at this. Angeli put together with her kids, and it's inspired by the students who won the climate prize, the state climate prize, working with the Shade Tree Commission. So if you just want to kind of like look at, to kind of get your head in the game a little, feel free to come and look at these.
Yeah, and if there's questions, I mean, there's usually questions that someone didn't ask, and I think, you know, as Patty pointed out, it was good to clear up mitigation as a word, because it's a very encompassing word. What does it actually mean in terms of urban forestry? And it's a truly encompassing word of all areas of public safety. And heat islands and flooding, those are all pieces that are attached to that. When we look at anything along the lines of putting these in priorities, it may seem a little bit difficult, but somebody will always tell me this. They'll say, you know, I really believe that planting is an important part for the future of the community. You know, I use the saying that, you know, if somebody asks me when should I plant a tree, I say it usually should have been 10 years ago. You know, but the problem is that that's not the case. But we can start today. We can start tomorrow. Yeah, and that's an important aspect of what we're doing. So, you know, again, please think about these, and again, ask questions. Let's break it down a little bit further if you need to. Does it fit what you're looking at? And then when these goals come out, and I think it's important to kind of just frame this. When Patty had said about public safety and mitigation, heat islands will be part of that. So that's something we have to understand. Flooding, mitigation of flooding would be a part of that for public safety. as Norm mentioned, the larger trees that might be declining or dying, that's part of public safety. So we have an overarching piece then, so those goals will now be formed as part of how we look at it.
One of the things too about the list, you might look at something like this and say community outreach, gee, that doesn't weigh very heavy on my mind. Community outreach is less important than many other things, but I'd like to propose that community outreach means that you get more friends on your side. You get more support, you get more ability to complete the goals that you have. So without friends in the community, you are gonna be really pushing a rock up a hill. When you have community outreach, when you get the community engaged, when they see tangible activities tied to your goals, you're gonna get more support. And probably anybody that looks for votes would know that you wanna get as much support and many friends as you can. So the idea that community outreach can be community activities, programs. One of the things we did in my community, a number of different times, I proposed that we said we'll have a contest with the kids to find the biggest tree in town, and the state runs a heritage tree, big tree database, so that you can see does Ocean have the biggest sycamore tree in the state? Does Ocean have the biggest cherry tree in the state? And that's the sort of thing that maybe tie into some community pride. So those are the kinds of things that say, well, my neighborhood has the biggest maple tree in the state. That's pretty impactful for us, and it may engender more support for other things, for funding, for maybe for development or push back on development, those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things you can think about that integrates a number of these different priorities.
So,
I tried to find out about the database for the county or the state one time, what is it? And I'm not sure anyone's maintaining any records from 30 years ago.
Some records have not been updated, some trees that are on that list still are not even in existence, so it's a sad norm, but I think based on budgets and circumstances.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
so Ted, now, do you want us to talk amongst ourselves for a little while?
Yeah,
What's the next step? What do you want us to
If
do?
you'd like to just, again, if you have any other questions, let's ask them, otherwise, let's just form into some types of groups and just make some discussion about this. We do have Shade Tree Commission members here, so they can break into the group also with you. Go ahead, first name if you don't mind.
Maura.
Maura, how are you?
I'm okay. So where does like shade fall into this for like when I envision desiring trees when I'm out in the community, a lot of times it's because I'm somewhere and I'm hot and I wish there was a tree. And I just was wondering like kind of where that falls in, and the other part of my mind goes to when we're looking for that shade, it's also the safety for our skin, skin damage, the playgrounds, the children needing shade. You know, we lack shade at our current playgrounds in town and at the schools. So just wanted to see like where that would fall.
So that falls into plantings, and it's really installation and reforestation. And I think as you pointed out, Maura, that there are areas that you realize that there seems to be less and less trees, and there was kind of a shift in public safety a lot of times. You know, we can see this on college campuses where I work very frequently, that they have, you know, either removed trees or raised branches on trees that make the whole campus look completely different in the sake of public safety, so that cameras can now view things. And you know, but again, at the same point, at what cost does that provide? And it provides less shade for the, you know, it's a heat island, as Patty had mentioned before. So that's an important aspect. But that would be in your installation of reforestation of plantings, because there's nothing existing there, and we need to get it back.
I would just point out, one of the problems we have in town, especially in communities, okay, is that the trees that there's part of the town, that's the town's property that we plant trees on, goes from, say, the curb to where your property starts, okay? But you've got the sidewalk, so there's little spaces in there. In my case, it's 15 inches in front of my house, okay? The spaces are not adequate for planting trees along streets, residential streets much in town anymore. Okay? So I think long-term, I see some kind of plan, I don't see what the plan is yet, okay? But is that we have to have trees planted on private property, okay? Now, I asked the guy from the state, he was talking about, because like West Park Avenue is a state road. And West Park is
County road?
County road, I'm sorry, county. I look at you very easily myself, but It was a county road, and he said, and if it is something that they have, they'll take care of it. Even if it's like an inch into their property, they'll take care of that tree if it's in bad shape or something. And they'll plant in those kind of trees. But they won't plant anything that have less than 6 or 7 feet, of open ground to plant in, 2,000 megaviews, something like that. So you have to take that in mind, okay? But that does mean, if you think about where you might be able to plant trees on your own property, okay, and then how we get that to happen, or whether it's gonna be only on the property owners, which I'd say that's what my house goes like. And, but it's a good thing, and we certainly would encourage that type of stuff, and we certainly would support, any, community help or information and so on and so forth, you need to come to us.
Well, and one other thing too about, because this is a topic that's come up a number of times, getting trees into private property or influencing growth of trees on private property. One of the things we did in my community is that we developed a small plot of land to build a nursery, a tree nursery. So we grew some trees, and those trees were designated to be donated onto private property. So we get trees that we've grown, and you can get a grant for something like that. You can say, because Green Acres and some other things with the DEP talk about, do you have a program, do you have a project, we wanna give you money. Yes, Ocean wants to develop a 100 by 100 foot plot of land to develop some trees. And then we're gonna donate those to homeowners, so we get our trees into their yard, and that's a way that something like that can be accomplished.
Have you ever worked with something like a concept of a community garden, but kind of like what you were saying is that the town has a nursery, but basically, if someone doesn't have the space, you have a small plot of land, or you have a pool, or you have something where you have, your front yard just can't handle it or something like that, but you wanna plant a tree, but you can't do it on your property. Have you ever worked with the community where maybe the town devotes a piece of land where you can sponsor that tree and you can say, I'm gonna buy this tree and then, I'll, whatever I would have paid to have it on my land, I'll do it on this land
Sure.
instead. Is that?
Yeah, and there's places like that you could designate in a public park that says, here's the community forest. And then each tree that's planted, you have a simple plaque, you have a community walkway, a community arboretum, that then says, okay, the community can fund this sort of thing, or a community public-private partnership, state grant partnership, where you can say, we want the community to look healthier and greener, and so this section of this park is going to be designated for that sort of thing, plantings for the community that otherwise would not be available. Yes?
And Anjali, just on a quick note, what Maura and you were both speaking about, we've done Arbor Day activities where we've planted 30 trees in a park because the park had the space, and it was an area where our Arbor Day activities took place. And they did a memorial grove. Some trees were picked for certain perspectives by residents for a memorial for one of their relatives, but it gave diversity within that. But they planted 30 trees in a park, and you can imagine the impact that has in 5 years.
And to that end, this came up a while ago, at the 10-year anniversary, that there's a 9/11 Memorial Grove. So someone could say, would you like, and you poll the community, would you like to donate to a Memorial Grove? Would you like to buy a tree for the 9/11 Memorial Grove?
So those are ways in which you can both look at, tree planting, Arbor Day activities that would allow you to reforest areas.
And then in terms of here tonight and everyone, just where as a township, we prioritize where we're going to be planting trees. And I really am curious if you've got this scheduled today, or if there's an opportunity for people to share where they think trees are most needed and where they'd like to see more trees in town.
Well, the goal would be is that if we look at priority and we rank priority for planting as a very high priority for us, then what we do is we start to craft that into an element and an objective and goal, which is going to basically say that we're going to focus on pursuing a grant for planting, and then we would look at what those plantings would look like. Would they look at maybe possibly doing a small grove in a park? Would it be multiple plantings at different locations? Some towns have a kickoff where they do Arbor Day activities for a week. Some people do it for one day. Some people put one tree in. Other towns I've seen put 60 or 70 trees in. So it really depends on how ambitious they want to get with it. And again, it becomes part of that community engagement. Because I can only say this, from a council perspective, from a shade tree perspective, there's a very few number of those individuals where when you look at the community and the broader community, volunteers coming out and actually being a part of that makes something like that happen.
Who was I talking to about meetings, any meeting in general where if you're unhappy, you tend to more likely to come out, right, Patty? So that's the sort of thing that says, you poll the community and say, where do you want trees planted? So we poll the 20 people here and we say, where do you want, in what neighborhood do you want trees planted? Well, I want it in mine, I want it in my next door neighbors, and so on. Then you have folks that then are engaged and committed to this sort of activity. The day after they're planted, someone's gonna complain and say, why did that person get a tree? Is that the mayor's brother-in-law? How come I didn't get a tree? That sort of thing. But that's the way that you can get community engagement that says, we're going to plant trees, tell us where you want them, because we want you on our side.
A lot of towns have lotteries, you know, we're gonna have 50 trees to plant, everyone who wants a tree, let us know, and then somehow, you know, don't ask, I'm not gonna pull the number, I can guarantee that, anyway, but that's a lottery, and those people get a tree, and then the next year, either the next people on the list, or however you do it, you come up with a plan that you publish, and then it makes a success.
And I would say that if planting is a priority and safety is a priority, that these two overlap, and maintenance in it, but they overlap in terms of the where. Because it's if safety is public health, and you want more trees planted, well, you need to plant trees, or it's where it's gonna be a marked improvement in public health, where the air quality isn't as good, or the heat islands are more, or contributes to flooding. So I think some of these priorities we're gonna be looking at, there's a real overlap in them working together.
And it wouldn't hurt in any way, and I'm gonna use the example of everyone's comments, and we need to get you kind of breaking up into putting this in play now. So our goal is you can add in something like more, you just mentioned parks. Angela, you just mentioned, public space or a place where community, arboretum could be built or something along those lines. Those are important aspects. Educating, first name, I'm sorry. Carol, educating, the Board of Education, and that seems interesting to say it that way, but educating the Board of Education about, invasive species and how that's creating a problem in the neighborhood because that one tree is spreading other trees around the community. That's cost, and there's a cost involved in that, and so it's cheaper for for it to be removed than it is to allow it to continue to persist. So as you look at these things, and I think Carol, that's you could mention removal of invasive species, notifying people. So how do we do that? We can put that on the township's website. We can put that out there and make it accessible. If people go to the library, there could be a brochure. You can make public service announcements, anything along those lines. I write a number of public service announcements for communities, especially during spotted lanternfly activity. We had people asking what to do. They were flooding the town with phone calls. A business administrator called me and said, Ted, I can't deal with this anymore. It's like we get a phone call every 3.5 minutes. What do I do? They're all over my house. They're all over my yard. And he said, what do we do? And I said, well, let's send out a Nixle message, and then we gave out PDFs on how to control them. So this is important information, but again, we need to get you to start thinking and put it in priorities. But if you have something that is essentially, you're saying, where does it fit in here? And I'm going to go back to what Patty said, about the mitigation piece. Make it clear, like, I like plantings and reforestation more, but I want it to be in parks where the youth are and where the kids are. There's no protection for the excessive sunlight and harmful UV rays. Angela, you can say I'm interested in Arbor Day activities where maybe we can do mass plantings in the community, right, and create a park, right? You have one of the greatest parks in your community here, just so you know, right? So go ahead.
So I have another question. So in my mind, if I go to David's Rouge with my little kids and I think that's one of the concepts, if you stand at the park there, you're just baking under the sun with your kids. But I feel like if I asked for trees to go around that, then the town would tell me, well, there's gonna be maintenance involved, and then somebody's gonna have to come with a leaf blower, so that's probably not a good spot. And I would think that it would get turned down because of that. I don't know, what part of the
I'll give you one piece of feedback, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'll just say, I've been in meetings where it's been turned down during one CFMP, and between the turn of events, the next 5 years, that park was planted out before you could even imagine what it looked like. And it was just a shift in mindset, or it was a shift in personnel, whatever, but things change, and you can't, the one thing I never say is I never say never. I was told by one person who was very close to me that I worked with, said, "You're the eternal optimist." I said, "I'd rather do that than be the worst and think that nothing is going to work
I
out."
just want to say, a key component of this, and then probably want to stop breaking up, right,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
don't lose people, is that the plan actually allows the council and Dave's office to start creating budgets that allow us to attach ourselves to the plan, right? Once we get attached to the plan, then we can figure out, you know, the time frame in which things are built and how that relates to the budget, right? So the reason it's a 5-year plan, because every year we'll be able to have a certain amount of money that's kind of set aside to do this, and then we can figure out how to incrementally, you know, kind of get to the spot to fulfill the plan. So you might say your tree that you want in this place, this fictitious place or something, you might want at some point, right? That may or may not be inside the first year, but it may be within the 5 years, right? So, because then we, at some point, the priorities have to be kind of set, and then we kind of like live with the priorities based on the fact that we have budget every year to figure out how to make that work.
But
So
if
I would
you're
just
here-
suggest we get to the,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because we're gonna lose
Yeah,
people.
that's good.
And being here, that means your voice is gonna be multiplied because someone's not here.
So I hope that was clear, was that?
Okay, so we have people in the audience, and I don't know who everybody is, so if anybody wants to just quickly identify who they are and what they're from, so we can kind of have that conversation, if you're just a resident sitting in, or if you're from an organization or group. Carol, go ahead.
The garden.
Garden Club, okay. First name? Marion.
I'm a resident of
David Brown, Township Manager.
Township Manager. Thanks for coming, Dave. So here, Maura, you're hearing, you know, again, your community is supporting the efforts to listen. I think that's the most important
Yeah,
part.
people showing up, that's
All
fun.
right.
Okay, and behind Dave?
Resident.
Resident, welcome.
Jim Bay, treasurer of the Sierra Club in the 11th and 13th district.
Great, thank you.
Maura Wanamasa PTA.
Greg Weiss, Township Engineer.
Thanks, Greg, for coming.
Mayor Planning Manager.
Rich Baldwin, formerly DPW.
Donna is Shade Tree Secretary.
So you have representation in the community, and I think it's important. And as the councilman stated, you have to realize something. Put your priorities in this. Let's get them ranked. Let's get something here that's tangible that we can walk away from today. Again, we don't want to belabor the evening and make it drawn out, because we're here to listen. That's not a problem, but we need to get some concrete feedback so that we could start moving this forward. And as these goals get developed, you'll be able to read them, and Maura, you could be the person looking at it and saying, you know what, I would really I like what this is saying, but I think it should be more so parks. And that could be something that you can have more advocacy about. And, you know, as we keep talking about things like this, you know, it's a matter of how we go forward. And we can't go forward without picking these priorities.
So Ted, did you want people to like stay?
Yeah, if you want to just
Mix
move
it
in,
up.
yeah, just let's start having
Mix it
conversation.
up. Here's the map, you wanna look at it. And by the way, we also have a Defilia, a planning board.
there you go.
Hi. So what do you guys see when you see this? What do you want?
All right.
Sure.
It's always good to keep moving.
So I was thinking public safety first, obviously, but
Okay.
planting, because I feel like we're losing a lot of trees, so I think planting should be a priority. And then the next is preservation of the ones that we do have, and I feel like there's a lot of people taking trees down that maybe shouldn't be, but again, that's a whole different.
So you had
animal.
tree preservation is 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
4, I think, for species. I don't know what you think. Diversification. I was thinking, I kind of,
Because that's not just Arbor Day, it's much broader than that.
right, planning, yeah.
Yeah,
okay, I agree.
it's planning, and I think, you know, and sometimes we think about this. Arbor Day activities could be broad spreading activities where you can do mass plantings in parks, and so that we're used to thinking like, oh, it's an individual tree. Doesn't necessarily need to be that.
It's also big education.
Green fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, green.
And if you how many of you have ever done the seedlings from the Forest Service for Arbor Day?
We've been doing that
So-
for years now.
Yeah, so now if those seedlings are given out, you could have hundreds of trees that are now going into the community for residents, and what you're picking can now be used in parks and anywhere else, if it's organized.
So I'm sorry, I lost between the community outreach and Arbor Day activities. They're not, I feel like they're somewhat related, or like Arbor Day is.
They are related. They are related, but community outreach is a much deeper. I'm going to give you the feedback that community outreach is a much deeper involvement of getting people on your side, as Ray said. It's building community. It's getting people to understand what community forestry is about and the importance of it.
He wants you to make your 4.
Just pick, you guys. It's okay.
Right.
So, well, I think you wanted Arbor Day.
Yeah. Arbor
Yeah.
Day.
Okay.
as- And then 5, I would say.
Who do I represent?
And then 6 is by default.
On the day to
Who
plan.
do I represent?
Your council.
Am I C? Okay, so I'll go public safety, plantings, preservation, community outreach, Arbor Day, and diversification.
Yeah, oddly enough, diversification though, okay, diversification is really, to me, not, it's not a separate anything. When you plant, you wanna plant with diversification in mind, but you're not gonna go out and tear out trees that are,
No.
tear out the sweet gum trees because you wanna have more diversification as
Correct.
a percentage, right?
That's not the way it works. Correct.
Diversification to me is not really a priority.
It's kind of a given,
Something
right?
you wanna do.
So put Norm down for number 6.
Norm, you disagree with me on
We're
mine.
going we're going backwards. We're gonna
I'm
we're
just
gonna build
saying
out.
It's not really a number to have.
I know,
that
but
we should talk
but
about.
it is a number because it's up there. And we have the
Oh,
planning
okay.
category.
Yeah, play nice.
I'm just contrary kind of guy.
It's a valid observation because we know who do it, that we always say, what should we plant, what should we not plant, so it's part
It's
of
the
it.
curmudgeon, right?
Yeah. But for the whole community writ large, it may not be as given.
So does Shade Tree wanna add in their, list?
Well, I think we're
Norm is
individuals.
dead.
I think we're individuals.
I have, 2 community members I just
Go
wanted to
ahead.
work
Go ahead,
with.
Alex.
So,
What was your group, by the way?
we were just residents, I think.
Okay, great, awesome.
So we said public safety first and foremost, and then tree preservation.
Wait, hold on 1 second. So public safety was 1. Tree preservation was 2.
Yeah, planting was 3. And I guess, I don't know, we were kind of in between, but I guess species diversification would come with that, with the planting. I think that's.
They kind of go hand in hand as you're
Yeah.
planning. Yes.
And then community outreach, so people know, what the laws are and
That's
also
right.
what to plant. And then the last is Arbor Day activities.
And I think one just on a quick point to make on Arbor Day, because it's simply a day it's celebrated, it really doesn't seem to take that much weight out of like when you're looking at everything else, and so that's where it always seems to fall in the lower quadrant. But I don't think of it as anything other than the fact of it's a recognition of the efforts and activities you're doing. It's kind of your way of highlighting what your Shade Tree Commission is doing. It doesn't necessarily, number 6 doesn't mean it's a low priority. It just means that it doesn't come across as being the eminent thing that you're planning around all year round.
But it's like not yet, do you know what I mean? It might
Yeah,
be
yeah,
something like we're working towards, but it's almost like we have to get this in place before we can be like, we're gonna do an Arbor Day activity. It's almost like-
And I'll just give you some insight, honestly. When there was a community that we worked with that did the Arbor Day where they did the mass plantings, until they got to that level, which was years out, it was almost 10 years that they were doing CFMP, so it was like their 3rd round. They finally said, we need to really get traction here, and we wanted to do this. And they did it, and they started off at a recreational field, it was a PAL. And when they did that, they did a walkway in and out, and they did it around the parking areas, and they, just to create barrier to heat islands for the kids that were there doing activities and exercises. And what ended up happening was that kind of was the impetus to move that forward. That became like a higher priority all of a sudden because they saw the value of what. Okay.
We did, for our Arbor Day activity this year, as far as trees were concerned, for the last few years, there was a program that was giving us free trees.
Mhm.
Okay? And And then there were trees for third graders, which were also free. Both of those things didn't happen this year. So we actually bought trees for third graders and trees to give out
Thank you.
that we.
Thanks for coming.
So
So-
what category are we, trying to get to next?
We have Sierra in the house,
Go ahead.
Okay,
so a
I
nonprofit,
would mirror SC, mirror that.
Yeah?
SC,
good choice.
public safety,
14362.
planting, tree
The
preservation.
councilman agrees.
Good choice.
Councilman agrees.
I probably show the school board, although they're not here.
What are
right?
the letters
Am I the
represent?
closest representative?
Nothing, right?
No, they're just for me to keep track of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I be
I
B?
think she trumps you now.
Sure,
Jeff.
yes.
One as a
B
PTA?
for,
Environmental Commission?
oh,
No, I did Sierra because environmental, but that's
Well,
okay.
you can speak
I could
for
put you
Caitlin.
down. I'll
You can
put
speak
you
for
down.
Caitlin.
Okay.
she's the chair of the environmental commission.
That's okay, Sierra could have it.
Okay.
I did tree preservation as my number 1.
Got it.
Public safety was my number 2. Community outreach, my favorite thing ever, but I made that number 3.
What a renegade.
4 is plantings.
Really?
Really?
5 is
sorry.
Arbor Day activities. And last is species.
By the way, is this one of these things where statistically, if somebody does something that is totally out of the norm, we discard that?
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
no.
No,
It's like
no,
one
we
of
can't
those,
discard
it's
Julia,
an aber-
she's too essential.
It's a little anomaly, right? It's a
So,
aberration,
Ken, I'm
so
on
she's
shade
out.
tree, but I'm not, we're individuals.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I-
that's fine.
well,
I'm sorry.
Okay, so mine would be, Safety.
You're the school board.
We'll say, Guanamasa PTA, I don't know much.
Okay.
So you can be
Okay,
school board.
go
yeah.
ahead.
School board. So number 1 is plantings.
Sorry, I'm gonna planting. Go ahead.
Number 2 is public safety. Number 3 is tree preservation. 4 is diversity. 5 community outreach, and 6 Arbor Day.
Got it. Great, thank you, Mara. Who was that, Anjali, who else was in your group?
It was that gentleman who left and Georgia here.
George, okay, great, thank you.
There was a lot of discussion about old trees being taken down and not being, like, no replacement.
Yeah,
And
and-
no
and-
penalty for it, and that's, I know that's not.
And that's part of MS4. So Georgia, there's a permitting process now, which is done through what's called MS4. It's the DEP, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, put in a permitting process to prevent the loss of trees on private property. It also works on public property also, but it's the outreach from the DEP, which goes under stormwater management.
So tell me how that works.
so can,
Is that when they're actually gonna do work on the property? That's when
Yeah.
you're-
So if you want to remove a tree, and they're varied. Thank you, Maura.
Thank you
for
for
your
coming.
process, for being part of the process. So what they do is they take the opportunity to tell you each town has tweaked it. I just was on. Ray and I were on a phone call today. They're updating their policy on next Thursday. They actually asked me to read through it. They are now accepting bond on all trees removed. No longer is it you can take a certain amount
It doesn't
under.
have to be developed, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be new development, there's any tree that's.
Any
removed-
tree on your property that's removed has to have a permit process unless it's a tree there's no fee if the tree is dead or diseased or is failing.
That's what we have right now.
Right.
And supposedly, the local representative, the MS4 responsible person, has said that our ordinances are okay right now,
Mhm.
at least without any modification.
That's good, that's good.
all right, so, Public Works, you here.
Of course, public safety would be number 1 for myself. Community outreach would be 2.
Okay. Preservation.
Yes, 3. Plantings, 4.
Okay.
Diversification is 5, and Arbor Day is 6.
Okay. Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got one less slot.
Go ahead, man.
I would have safety be first because I know safety includes air quality, heat islands and flooding, so that's, which I know, and then planting. 2, preservation, outreach, Arbor Day, diversification.
Okay, well, it looks like C, D, and E have it, so thanks, everybody.
And what about, we got Ed, we got Ed here, we got
So
planning.
we have Ed, you wanna,
Ed,
Sure,
hold on 1 second, I'm gonna just grab this real quick, I'm gonna put it into another format, hold on 1 second.
I just want to say that our group also talked about areas, and Maura, who left, you know, was that park in Wanamasa, and Jim mentioned the group by the area by Poplar Village. That's like a blue acre area that could be turned into a wonderful park with some shift in maintenance and allowing some of the trees to grow there. And then there was a definite consensus with a lot of us with needing planting and more tree canopy in the most densely populated area of town, in the apartments. That Middlebrook and that whole area, and the need to really be creative and create solutions and ways to develop the tree canopy there.
Yeah,
Part of, and Patty, part of the development of CFMP is going to include geographic priorities, not just these priorities, but geographic priorities, how the plan is implemented, geographically, time-wise, how it's implemented, and where the impact is going to be. So those kinds of things will be incorporated.
Great, getting a head start.
How about if I just make a note and then we'll.
yeah, we'll add that, that's all right, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm trying to do something, it's not gonna work.
Okay.
All right, this is the shade tree, right? The last
No,
one?
it's planning.
Oh, planning board, I'm sorry.
Talk about a serious expression.
Great, come on.
Yes.
Alright, so the first one is tree preservation. Trees are infrastructure, and it's a lot easier to preserve the infrastructure you have than to try and go out and create it. Costs less money to preserve it than it is to recreate it. The second one then, and I'm really torn on this, but I'm gonna have to go with public safety because it is important, but I think that is followed very closely by community outreach. Community outreach is absolutely critical. People do not understand how trees work, they do not know what they do for their community, and we need to make sure that they understand, so not only are they not cutting them down, but they're actively planting them and supporting whatever the town decides to do to support trees. After that, I lost my categories here. Can we come
Still
back?
have
We're gonna go back.
planting,
Hold on, we're gonna go
diversification,
give it to you in
and
2
arbor.
So
seconds.
then it's diversification. Diversification is, you know, Norm, I disagree with you a little bit. I think that some of the calorie pears and other invasive species that have cropped up in town probably do need to come out and get replaced. And I also think that we do need to think smartly about our shade trees, where we put them. I think we need to talk about tree boxes. We just had, and unfortunately she left, we just had the whole meeting about complete streets before this. Tree boxes are a big piece of stormwater management and complete streets and slowing traffic and making things more pedestrian friendly. Then what do we have left? We have
Plantings and Arbor Day.
plantings and Arbor Day in that order. Arbor Day is great, but on that list, it is at the bottom for me.
Okay.
So I have a request, it's you're doing the complete streets, and so we don't work in silos. It would be wonderful if you could share whatever findings or information you all gather that we could share with our consultants.
I would talk to Jeff,
Jeff?
who can coordinate, cause I'm just
Wonderful.
along for the ride.
Good?
What do you want?
I want whatever they're figuring out with complete streets and whatever their recommendations
Oh,
are.
it's
It'd be great to incorporate that as stakeholder
Yeah,
feedback.
send a quick thing to me and Dave Brown,
Okay,
okay, cause Dave's the one really kind of.
got it. We'd love to incorporate any of your findings and recommendations into
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
our stakeholder feedback.
It's a good idea,
Buy more.
good idea. It's a good
We
idea.
don't wanna work in
She
silos.
led the whole complete streets upstairs
Oh,
before.
good.
Who did that?
Mora.
Oh,
Cool.
cool.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about things that should come out. I do know that Deal Road, where that development went on Deal Road and everything else, but before anything was going on there, that was a cornfield for years, right? From was Ocean Electric, and now it's a kiddie thing, that building, just north of Deal Road, the first business before they did anything. That whole area was
Here
just
we go again.
empty.
So what would you like to do now?
Okay, what's the next step here? Ed?
First calendar.
You're specific?
So yeah, do you have,
I'm still
Patty,
asking
did you do,
about that.
you did yours,
Oh.
right?
I did this, I
Did
did,
yours
I
as
did
part of
mine.
that? You're the first one?
And you, you're done, Julie, or you did yours?
I did mine.
Good.
So, I think we
So,
can
all
wrap
I,
up.
all I think we have is last 2 shade tree members.
And
Oh,
Ken.
didn't
Ken,
it
we
say
have
it's
to
not
hear
one
from you,
person,
Ken.
it's each
You
one?
want mine?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, Ken.
And Norm, I'm gonna need yours, so you have to have your numbers.
You got
Oh, did you?
safety, planting, preservation, diversification, outreach.
Public safety first,
Okay.
tree preservation second, cause I'd rather save the trees that are there than plant new ones. And planting would be third. Community outreach would be third, then planting would be fourth.
Diversification,
Arbor Day would be next, and then diversification.
Got it.
Did we have Norm's or no? We didn't get yours yet. Yeah? Okay.
Where's the coffee?
Good, okay, got it.
That's it. All right. So in terms of, and I'm just gonna grab this off to the side here. So looking at the stakeholder feedback, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna just put together the information. We're gonna give it in the rankings that it came out as and priorities. It doesn't mean that that's only the way the priorities are, because we're gonna consider each group too. Okay, that's important for us to look at. What happens then is as the overall goals are listed, the elements that are part of the goal will then be pieces, and I think as we were listening to the conversations, it was the specific items that each group brought up. Like, so in other words, as Anjali had mentioned, you know, maybe a community space, a larger area where if you don't have property, you can actually utilize other space within the community. The communication pieces, looking for outreach, you know, Ken had mentioned a few things regarding educating residents, and I think that's an important aspect of this plan, is not just to say, okay, we asked for your feedback, but how do we continue to let people in the community know the value of trees, especially on their own properties, not just our shade trees in town, but they're on their own property, so that they'll think twice before they remove the tree. So those are aspects that are important here, and getting these into categories and then writing some subgroup pieces to it where it'll be more defined, as you know, in Patty's comment. Somewhere along the lines of mitigation is you know, the heat islands, and I think that was almost echoed by Maura as the same thing. It wasn't just in an area where there's parks where there's children, but there's areas that are, you know, community sections that are considered to be more underserved or at risk. So, right, and the goal is I think sometimes we don't hear, and you know, I'm gonna applaud you on that one, Patty, because a lot of times we don't hear from stakeholders who don't make it to meetings like this. And their reason that it's an underserved area or it's an at-risk area is because they don't have a voice. So we need to have that voice here at the table sometimes. And it takes people in the community to kind of look out and say, okay, how do we protect other people who aren't able to actually maybe advocate for themselves? All right?
And we have tried to do outreach to reach out to communities all throughout town, because ideally we don't wanna be speaking for other people, we want them to
Yeah.
hearing from them directly, then we will continue to do that. And one of the things I would suggest that everybody's at this meeting, and I thought there was just great energy tonight, I thought we all got energized to talk. Go on the Facebook, go on Ocean Cares, go on the Facebook and say, hey, went to this meeting, you know, and we're actually looking for people's input, and, you know, they're approachable, and talk to Shade Tree and have a conversation. And yes, trolls happen and people get nasty, but still, we can do something positive. So like, let's share. Let's be a beginning. Let's be a beginning.
So there's an outreach thing we send out that says something like, if you love trees, read this. If you hate trees,
Wait, if you hate trees, let me read it to you.
Let me tell you why you're wrong.
I would say at this point we're going to form some goals. Those goals will now be provided to you in print. So at the next opportunity to get this out, which I would probably say within about 2 to 3 weeks, you should get a notification from whoever notified you about tonight's meeting, letting you know, or wherever you looked for it, please look for it again to see information. And what we'll do is we'll post on the town's website these goals, and you'll be able to look at them, read through them, and ask for, you know, we'll ask for additional input and feedback from what you're reading. And we ask that all you do is you just take the time to read it and really, you know, consider if there's anything that you feel is important enough to add more, you know, weight into that goal.
And what will be the process for them giving feedback?
So we'll open it up for about a 2-week period, and we're
So
gonna
it'll be like a portal that.
yeah, it'll just be where you can actually write comments. It may just be even something as simple as a Google sheet where you'll
So you'll
type
create
in.
you'll create
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I'll post something on Ocean Cares.
Fabulous, and we'll all jump in.
Jump in.
And the goal is just to be able to
Fight
keep
the
the dialogue
trolls.
going.
What?
Fight the trolls.
Fight the trolls.
Yeah, it's to keep the dialogue going, because I think what happens is, you know, we come to a meeting like tonight and you hear, okay, we have all this information that we shared, we go away from here and then, okay, where is the process, and now I heard this was passed and it's moving forward, and I didn't even know where I stood and you know, where my feedback was valued. So that's the next part of it.
Priorities are taken in, they're distilled, they're put into a format, and then the real important part is to say, how do those priorities inform actions? So priorities for these kinds of things are then gonna say, okay, here's an actionable elements that then achieve these priorities, achieve these goals. And that's the real value of the CFMP, and that's the real value of how it's communicated to the public.
Patty, I think since we have the sign-in sheet, we should be proactive in notifying everybody of when the next step is and when we.
Provided you all wrote legibly, that will be very possible.
And I wanna just kind of make one comment, and just before we kind of put some closure to this, is Ed spoke a number of things, and it's interesting to hear, because I'm hearing it in communities over and over. Reducing the speed limit, making it more viable for people to be out in their neighborhoods walking, being able to interact. And there is this kind of approach to looking at this that, you know, people want to be a part of their community and they want to interact with it, and they don't know where that's going to happen. And I think as he brought up a number of great initiatives, I heard Patty say, well, you know, I need to know more about those. And, you know, the idea is we need to share that, and that's what happens. Sometimes we're working on our own projects, or we're working in what it doesn't seem like a silo, but it might be a silo. And when we hear it, it's like, that's great, I want to be a part of that. So I thank you for sharing those ideas. All right.
I thought what you said was okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
But it is important to realize, like, you know, sometimes, and this is something that kind of comes up. Someone will say something like plantings, and, you know, they'll be using planters. And I think, you know, that's a way of getting, although it may not seem like a long, sustainable piece to it, we may use plants and plantings and planters in some locations short term, and then in 2 years those plants are then put back out into an area where they're replanted. So they can be somewhere, you know, where it's almost like you're putting in containerized plants, you're letting them grow out a little bit, and then you're using them as a landscape plant somewhere in a park. So they can be, you know, repurposed and recycled. So I think that's great.
You can even break up concrete and make a 5x5
In
square.
my early years of arboriculture, I used to do what was called Jersey City tree pits, and I used to actually, we had a concrete cutting company that would cut the sidewalk, and we would jackhammer the sidewalk out and place a tree there. And that was an amazing process, but that put a lot of trees in Jersey City back in the day.
How are those trees doing?
They usually made it about into their 20th or 30th year, and then they started to decline. But I always say, you know, Ray and I have this belief system that if we can preserve trees for 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 years, it gives the opportunity for a new tree to be planted and then take its place. And sometimes that's all it takes. It's not just, you know, the decision to remove it is the decision to remove it, and then it's void of that area. So, all right. Well, I just want to put some closure to this by saying thank you for coming out to the stakeholder meeting. Thank you for making your time valuable for us. It was great to get the feedback, and we look forward to getting your feedback again once these goals come out. So
And you
please
should be
stay
real
involved.
proud. You should be real proud. Ocean, I see a real vibrant community. I see folks that care about what's going on. So you guys should be proud of what's happening.
And Moore is not here to see the last slide. But
Aw, kid under a tree. There you go.
that is actually Brian McDonald's
Aww.
son.
Oh, Brian's the DEP.
Brian is the
Tree guy.
state forester.
Yeah.
That's his son at a tree they planted together. So
Aw,
yeah, when he was born.
sweet.
All right.
The DEP, are you?
Great. This is great, thanks.
Thanks for coming,
Friends
everybody.
with Brian.
Yes.